Vocational Training Head vows to rebuild school burned by arsonists. Western Province facing hardship due to floods and COVID-19. 2 senior police officers arrested on allegations of fraud.
This is National EMTV News with Turaho Moria.
Good evening and thanks for joining us for Monday's news. The head of a technical school in Hela Province that was burned by arsonists last month has spoken out, saying the school will be rebuilt. IPAU Technical Vocational Training Center has never charged school fees since it began. Instead, students are encouraged to pay the registration fee of 50 kina with building materials or food. On the 23rd of April, armed villagers ransacked the institution and set to fire more than 10 buildings.
The events that triggered the attack on IPAU Technical Vocational School are not clear at this stage, but a handful of young men destroyed the buildings of a school that showed great promise. The founder of the school, Thomas Kopari, has spoken out about the attack, saying he has not given up and that he will rebuild the school.
Time this last school daytime, all cooking time. I'm all planty, sumatin inside laws. Already, miss our summer not school again.
Thomas Kopari and his wife started the school in 2015. The idea was to give people in Hela the opportunity to gain technical knowledge at no financial cost to their families. They used their own savings to construct the buildings and pay for the running costs. What also stood out was that the school made a decision not to charge fees. Instead, students could pay the 50 kina registration fee in kind.
But 3-4 boys leading. Some boys joining one time cooking, all things also service in a good plan.
The school also got the attention of the UN, which provided some additional support. But Kopari says while the buildings have been destroyed, they will rebuild the classrooms and resume. Scott Waide, National EMTV News.
The extent of damage caused by floods in parts of Western Province remain unknown. Western Governor Taboy Awiyoto says the province is handicapped financially as funding is being used up in the COVID-19 operations. Yoto is appealing to the national government to assist with food rations and logistics.
Parts of Middle Fly in Western Province are underwater following heavy rain and flooding. According to authorities on the ground, the floods happened while operations of COVID-19 were at hand. North Fly MP James Donald visited the affected areas.
At the same time, we are caught by surprise that in a few days and weeks, there has been a natural disaster that took place.
Communities in the Middle Fly, especially in the Lake Murray area, have seen almost 3/4 of land covered by water. Schools have closed and most government services on hold. The Western Governor is appealing to the national government for assistance.
We've only done an assessment, but to provide support for the member North Fly has flown over Lake Murray where the flood has taken place. And he's done an assessment area review and it's done a report and sent for us. I am not able to provide support because I'm financially crippled at this stage.
Authorities on the ground say communities need relief. However, the province is also dealing with its COVID-19 operation. MP Donald says people need food rations due to food sources damaged by the floods.
All the gardens and food that people go to the islands to collect their food are also covered. And it's going to be another headache, another burden, another stress added onto our COVID operation.
Jacob Power Jr., National EMTV News.
The National Fraud Squad has arrested former Assistant Police Commissioner for Human Resource, Sylvester KALAUT, and Police HR Director Superintendent Bob Kerry yesterday. Chief Superintendent Sylvester KALAUT was terminated from the force in March this year after being suspended due to ongoing investigations, including insubordination. On the recent arrest, both men were each charged with 2 counts of abuse of office and conspiracy to defraud. These charges relate to allegations of misusing police pension funds totaling close to 1 million kina.
The allegations in this matter date back to 2018. Police are alleging that former ACP KALAUT and HR Director Kelly, who were then signatories to the police pension suspense account, had authorized and misapplied close to over 948,000 kina. Both KALAUT and Kelly were released from the Boroko police station on police bail yesterday. KALAUT's arrest yesterday comes 2 days after KALAUT was successful in a national court application for leave seeking a judicial review challenging the process of David Manning's appointment as Commissioner for Police in December 2019. The application was filed on grounds that the process involved in the appointment of David Manning was biased and did not follow proper process. KALAUT's lawyer, who also represented second plaintiff Fred Yakasa, told the courts last Thursday that one of the requirements for the COP's position was for the applicants to have a tertiary qualification, a criteria Manning did not meet. After Justice David Kennings granted the leave application, Commissioner Manning released a statement saying he welcomed the court's decision for a judicial review. Meanwhile, as police commences investigation into these charges against KALAUT and Kelly, the court's orders on the judicial review states that all notices of motions and supporting affidavits be filed to all respondents by the 21st of May. This will be the first time the appointment of a police commissioner will be challenged legally, and the matter returns to court on the 28th of May. Thekla Gunga, National MTV News.
Between 2011 and 2015, Papua New Guinea recorded an increase in road accidents that resulted in deaths. According to Road Traffic Authority, over 16,000 deaths and injuries were recorded by police and traffic authorities. RTA Chief Executive Nelson Terema says this is alarming despite efforts to enforce traffic rules in the modern age.
The RTA Chief Executive says these deaths can be avoided if road users follow traffic rules. He says most accidents are of neglect when drivers or passengers ignore rules. Terema says RTA is concerned that more deaths may result as more roads are being built and number of vehicles increase.
Now we have a statistics available, we do have data available. The trend is always going up all the time. So it looks like there's no end to it. It's going to continue to increase because at the moment the vehicle population has been increased. The cities and the towns have been developed. More people are coming into the city, more vehicles. So the trend looks like it's going to be increased all the time.
The RTA Chief Executive says addressing this issue may need everyone's input. He says the entire system of addressing road safety will include safer roads, speed limits and safer vehicles. RTA is working on a 20-year road safety strategy and a 5-year action plan.
That strategy outlines how we all have to work together to minimize the current road accidents happening in the country. It requires a wider consultation with various agencies, government departments, provincial governments. They have to participate, to contribute in order to minimize the current high rate of road accidents happening in the country. That document is a high-level document.
While RTA and police are closely working together, RTA is introducing efforts by working with the Education Department to introduce a curriculum that addresses road safety. Terema says this is crucial to minimize the number of accidents and deaths in the country.
Guide to teach road safety to the school children, ranging from elementary level to grade 12. And that book has been finalized. It took us about 3 to 4 years, and now it is been finalized. We are in the process of in the printing and the distribution part of it.
Jacob Power Jr., National MTV News.
5 men have been handed over to NCD police as suspects in a sexual assault incident involving the wife of a SSD officer. Stephen Wawa, a community leader at 9 Mile Moitaka Ridge in Ward 12 of Mosby Northeast, confirmed the handover of suspects. The incident occurred on Saturday morning around 3 a.m. when the victim walked out of the house following an argument with her husband at 9 Mile Settlement. Along the way, she was sexually assaulted by a group of men about 2 kilometers from her place of residence. Out of anger, members of the SSD raided the area where they believe the suspects lived and destroyed some properties, including houses. The situation is still tense, but community leaders are willing to work with police to bring normalcy back into the community. We'll have more stories after these messages. Welcome back. To ensure business is as usual under this new normal, NAS Fund today opened its new Client Service Centre for members. This new centre located in Waigani will cater for withdrawals, balance inquiries, including all NAS Fund client services. CEO Ian Tarutia says client services under the new normal requires larger space to ensure social distancing requirements are followed for the health and safety of clients.
This is the third branch to be opened in the nation's capital. Speaking at the opening today, CEO Ian Tarutia says this facility was not planned to be opened this year. However, due to circumstances under this new normal, they are forced to open. He said this new facility is fully functioning.
The new norm of client servicing in our business today now requires larger space as we ensure that there is physical separation, or the new buzzword, social distancing, is maintained for the health and safety of ourselves, but importantly, our valued members.
This new facility will now cater for withdrawals, balance enquiries, including all NAS Fund client services. Approval officers who were based at their headquarters are now moved to this branch, and all approvals will also be done in this new center. There are also plans to have this center the designated COVID-19 withdrawal processing center following government's decision next month. They are now accepting applications for withdrawals in relation to COVID-19. NAS Fund CEO Ian Tarutia, when thanking all staffs for their efforts, said they will continue to assist members with their superannuation enquiries. He said since January, they have processed over 57,000 transactions, totaling over 100 million kina.
Out of this, 33.8 million kina has been in the unemployment withdrawal category. This is excluding the special COVID payment as requested by government, which is pending parliamentary approval in next month's sitting. Once approval is granted, we expect our transactions and withdrawal value to increase as we prepare for and we are prepared for this in terms of our liquidity and the cash that we are holding.
The CEO adding that contributions from employers continues to remain positive since January. He further expressed his gratitude to all employers for fulfilling their obligations towards their employees in this challenging time.
Our contribution inflow or monthly payments from our employers since January continue to be positive and above what we budgeted this year and for the same period last year. To date, we have received 188 million in contribution payments, which averages 47.1 million kina per month.
Rayon Lakingu, National EMTV News.
The Department of Correctional Services plans to build a rural lockup at Mumeng in Bulolo district of Morobe. This is to ease overcrowding concerns at Lay's Buimo prison. It will be identified as a community correction center and will accommodate around 300 medium and low-risk convicts. The project is expected to cost around 10 million kina and established through counter-funding between Correctional Services and Bulolo District Development Authority.
A groundbreaking ceremony was officiated by CS Minister Chris Nangoy and Bulolo MP and Minister for National Planning Sam Basil on the weekend for the establishment of a rural lockup that was delayed for almost 10 years due to funding constraints. Almost 15 hectares of land was allocated to build a community correction center that would be funded by the Correction Service Department and Bulolo District.
We need to reduce the numbers of the prisoners and increase the numbers of the staff. That's the only way to manage escape and all this. That is why we came up to a plan that actually it's a plan before, but now since we have a budget to start, that is why we did this groundbreaking, just to split the number of prisoners. So mostly I think what we are planning to see is maybe we can keep the low risk and the medium risk here, and then maybe Buimo, we can manage the high risk.
The actual costing would
According to the Assistant CS Commissioner Policy Planning, Superintendent David Suwagu, the project cost around 10 million kina. Meanwhile, 1 million kina was already allocated by the CS Department and is yet to be released by the National Planning Department to begin construction.
Building a correctional facility is not only for prisoners, but you have to accommodate for other amenities that will take on some, as the Minister for Planning has said, if we could roll it out in the next 5 years, we would be looking at maybe 2 to 3 million a year so that we progress the project. Our technical team has been here and they've gone out, and then we've discussed with initial discussions with Honeybrooks to look at how we best modify and design immediately to get a project delivered. From the management's perspective, we're opting to have a facility that can gather for at least 200 to 3, so that it can ease the problem that we face in Buimo.
There are currently 6 existing community correction centers in the country, including Baya in Western Highlands, Misima in Milne Bay, Ambunti in East Sepik, and Finchafen in Morbe Province. Mumen Community Correction Center will accommodate around 300 medium and low-risk convicts from Lace Bumu prison to ease the ongoing overcrowding issue.
All pikini bloimilo bololo, all pikini bloimilo menyamia, na pikini bloimilo sampla aplo wampar, lo makam bridge na kambe kosem. Suppose you look, we make about 1/3 of the all prisoners is tablo buimo, 1/3 em kamlo display site. Osem na display even now you may kamlo celebrate him. But you may building one pla 200 or 300 men facility lo here, lo Olympic or Kalabus lo here.
The overcrowding issue at the 4 main prisons, Kervat in East New Britain, Baisu in Western Highlands, Bomana in Port Moresby, and Buimo in Lae has been a concern for many years. The Rural Lockup Project, or the Community Correction Center, is an initiative the CS Department has planned for to be carried out in 17 different locations in the country.
Mostly overcrowding comes on is when we have additional remands coming in, waiting for their wait court. So the issue is still pending, and when there is overcrowding, they start to ignite like frustration, and they become impatient, and then they start to make plans to escape.
Julie Badui, OA, National MTV News, Lae.
The Madang Provincial Hospital has been functioning without an intensive care unit for more than 10 years. Physician Dr. Martin Damon says the hospital's ICU was closed due to manpower shortage and no ICU equipment. For now, the Madang Hospital allocates 4 beds for ICU patients in each ward.
Intensive care units take care of patients with severe or life-threatening illnesses and injuries. It requires constant care and close supervision from life support equipment and medication. It is the heart of any hospital. But for Madang Provincial Hospital, the unit was closed for more than 10 years.
Most of our ICU nurses have left for other areas, and then ICU closed, and it has been there. Currently, every sections in every wards have ICU beds, at least 4 ICU beds. So that's how we are managing any critically ill patients.
ICU is an important unit of any hospital that requires specialized trained nurses to work in. In this unit, the ratio must be 1 nurse to a patient. However, Madang Provincial Hospital does not have enough ICU trained nurses with equipment to keep this important unit open for the people to access.
It's a challenging. Over the last 2 years,
when the country goes into financial crisis, the instructions from DPM down has stopped every essential departments to not to recruit, and that is really affected. Yeah, but with that we still somehow manage to continue the service.
For now, patients requiring ICU care are accommodated at each of the hospital wards, adding more workload to the number of nurses stationed at each of the wards. PHA CEO Paul Mabong says to address this problem, they have sent a number of nurses to be trained as ICU nurses.
The only thing is that we have the machines and we have some of the equipments there, but it cannot be used because, to put people in the ICU, you need people who are trained to work in those areas. You can't just put any nurse into that area. You need people who are trained in operating the machines and people who should be trained properly to resuscitate and all this.
The intensive care unit is empty. The unit still needs most of the equipment before it can be opened for patients to use. The unit would need at least 10 trained officers to work 3 shifts a day. CEO Paul Mabong says now ICU is one of the areas they are looking to address and fix for the hospital.
So that's why we did our part already starting this year, getting the 5 nurses down to Port Moresby for training. And when they come back, the hospital will be in full operation. 2 went and did the training last year, came back. And I think 1 is manning the place there, but it's not fully, it's not in full operation as yet.
Martha Louise, National EMTV News, Medang.
The National Forest Authority is rolling out forest extension programs in Bulolo district to achieve the government's vision to establish 800 hectares of forest by 2050. According to the National Forest Service Coordinator for Research and Development, Mondo Kama, the district has the potential to have over 100,000 hectares of forests. The National Forest Service currently has 4 established forest extension programs in Bulolo district.
Bulolo district can have more than 200,000 hectares of forest plantations, according to the National Forest Service Coordinator for Research and Development, Mondo Kama. Mr. Kama said this is in line with the government's vision on establishing 800 hectares of forest by 2050.
When the opportunities arises, like Leno was coming into our office to asking us to go out and plant trees on the land, we follow them out to the field or their land, and then we do these testings or research trials, and then we do report and do large scale planning after we successfully do those research trials.
Mr. Kama said as custodians of that vision, forest authorities have to ensure that more trees are planted. Earlier this year, officers from the Bulolo National Forest Service and primary schools in the area celebrated International Day of Forest. This was an opportunity for officers to stress on the importance of planting trees amidst forest degradation issues.
And it's internationally recognized that forest degradation and forest destruction by the human activities very large, and re-establishment of dead forest is at a very low rate.
There are 4 established forest extensions in the district. They include Bayune, Sambio 1, Sambio 3 and Kamogs.
We are talking about Bayune is almost 22,000 hectares that we have to establish. This year we're planning to do 10 hectares. And then Sambio is 2,165 hectares. We have done almost 12 hectares already. And then we have Sambio 1, we have done almost 5 to 10 hectares already, another 500 hectares to Kawa. And then Kamoks done 10 hectares, and we have almost 186 or 82 hectares to go. So we have.
Mr. Kama says, however, that there are funding constraints and they need support from the district, provincial and national government to do more extension programs. Charlene Airy, National EMTV News, Lay.
Tree kangaroos have one of the worst extinction rates in the world due to climate change and loss of habitat. Port Moresby Nature Park recently announced the arrival of its new resident, the unique golden tree kangaroo, also known as horepai. Horepai is extremely rare and is currently believed to be the only one in the world to be displayed in captivity.
The Port Moresby Nature Park recently welcomed its new resident, the unique golden tree kangaroo known as horepai or white man. This species of the Dorias tree kangaroo is categorized as vulnerable in PNG. His normal color should be dark brown, but because of a genetic disorder, this has caused him to be golden.
Horepai is the first to be found in Papua New Guinea and I believe in the world. Because they are white in color, they are golden. They basically because it has a genetic disorder. That's why they are white, or they refer to as golden tree kangaroos. They lack this pigment called melanin pigment, and they actually in the wild they're brown in color.
Horepai was found by a hunter from Rigo in the Central Province, and when the hunter saw that the young tree kangaroo was sick, he brought him to the Port Moresby Nature Park. The park took Horepai in and nursed him back to health. After 3 years of being in seclusion, this month he was released for display, mostly because he needed more space, and the park is celebrating May as the month of tree kangaroos.
Horepai behind the scenes, just to ensure that the animal is healthy, and just to ensure it's also transiting into the captive diet, and it's healthy and has choices to move around before we move them into the viewing areas for the visitors.
To date, Horepai is currently believed to be the only one of his kind in captivity. He gets to meet other tree kangaroos, and it's all new to him. But the park's wildlife manager says he's adjusting well to his new surroundings and even has a mate.
The other one is basically don't buy wild animals as pets. When we continue to buy animals on the street that we want to look after at our backyard, animals, they need bigger space to move around. And it basically needs technical knowledge and food that they will need, fresh water daily they will need because they're in a confined area. So we discourage people from buying wildlife, because when we start to buy wildlife, then we basically indirectly we're telling the hunter to go back into the wild and then bring more wild animals out from and then sell them on the street.
Lilian Sopera Kinea, National EMTV News.
And now looking at the NAS Fund market report, the Kina opened unchanged at $0.29 in the interbank market this evening. At Bank South Pacific, the Kina was buying $0.2825, 0.4369 Australian dollars, 0.2535 euro, and 29.65 Japanese yen. Looking at commodity prices at New York close, gold is trading higher. Cocoa closing lower, while copper and coffee closed higher. Palm oil closed lower, crude oil is trading higher, and copper closed higher. And on the stock market, the Dow Jones closed higher, ASX 200 is trading higher, and the All Ordinaries is trading higher as well. Stories making headlines overseas when we come back. Stay with us. Turning overseas, South America is emerging as the new epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Brazil, the virus is flourishing in poverty-stricken areas, leaving hospitals overwhelmed. And despite the growing death toll, the nation's leader is campaigning to reopen for business.
Piles of coffins, a vertical cemetery being built as Brazil's most populous city, São Paulo, braces for thousands more COVID victims. South America's biggest graveyard being dug nearby. More than 15,000 are dead, and Brazil's peak is yet to hit. With the virus exploding in packed favelas, Brazil officially has more than 230,000 cases. Some say the real number is much, much higher. This special COVID-19 intensive care unit opened in Rio de Janeiro 2 weeks ago. it's already full.
This disease is not kidding around. Whoever thinks it's a joke is going to lose their life.
But others worry the country's losing too much money. Taking to the streets, they want to reopen, like the US, like their president, Jair Bolsonaro, who calls COVID-19 a little flu, clashing with state governors who've put their own lockdowns in place.
Many more are going to die if the economy continues to be destroyed because of these lockdown measures.
The World Health Organization is now calling the Americas the center of the pandemic. Ecuador's health system collapsed in April, and Mexico is seeing a spike in new infections. Body bags line hallways and makeshift morgues. The government claims the curve is flattening. Healthcare workers say it's anything but. This GP says patients have died in his surgery, unable to get to the hospital in time. Medical and morgue workers say the toll is around 5 times higher than the official 5,000 deaths. The lockdown is largely ignored here. Overcrowded, poor conditions, a lethal breeding ground. A region already gasping, with fears the worst is yet to come.
Aid workers are scrambling to prevent a disaster in the world's largest refugee camp in Bangladesh. 2 people have tested positive for coronavirus in Cox's Bazar, and it's feared an outbreak could sweep through the packed camps.
This is one of the most crowded places on earth and home to about 1 million Rohingya refugees. Now COVID-19's arrived in the camps of southern Bangladesh, just what aid agencies had been dreading.
These populations are considered to be among the most at risk globally in this pandemic.
So is it likely that these 2 cases will lead to an outbreak?
I think it would be impossible to say it wouldn't. The trajectory of the disease in Bangladesh and in these camps is going to follow what we're seeing around the world.
Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya Muslims fled to Bangladesh in 2017, driven out of Myanmar by a brutal military crackdown.
They've suffered a great deal. They're very courageous, strong people. So they will also survive this, but they do need our support, and they need the international community to remember them.
The country of 160 million has been in lockdown since March, but cases have grown to over 20,000. There are just 2,000 ventilators in all of Bangladesh. In the camps, they're playing catch-up, building a hospital.
This is the temporary 5-bed setup of isolation center of Save the Children. There is no ventilators. This is essentials.
We do have isolation facilities set up, but it's just not going to meet the population needs. Again, 1 million people in a very, very crowded conditions. The good news is the population is quite young. More than half are children.
The focus now is on slowing the spread of COVID, but it won't be easy.
How do you do social distancing in a place that's 16 times more crowded than downtown Auckland? It's nearly impossible. Every time a refugee wants to wash their hands, they have to leave their shelter.
Desperate times for a group of